Hi everybody, thanks for coming to this session. I know there were other options there, so it's a real honour to have you all here. I think what you do is absolutely amazing. I'm in awe of your work, so well done everybody. I live in Manchester, which is the home of the suffragettes. And as a young woman growing up in the north of England, I never felt like I had experienced gender discrimination. I had a great education. I ended up going on to have some really great roles, worked at quite a high level. My female friends were strong, powerful, intelligent women. They could do absolutely anything that they wanted to do. And although I experienced some frustrating moments, going into meetings where men would only speak to other men, going to events where it was just an all-white male panel, I never felt like my gender was going to hold me back from achieving what I wanted. And then I got pregnant. And suddenly, it was as if the blindfold had been removed and everything came into focus. So what I want to talk to you about today is the motherhood penalty, pregnancy and maternity discrimination. These are issues that many of the patients that you're dealing with will be experiencing when you're not there. And unless you talk to them about it, you would have no idea that this is happening. But if they are experiencing discrimination, this will be having a really severe impact on their mental and physical health. Am I pointing at the wrong place? There we go, okay. So 2.5 years ago, I launched a project called Pregnant Then Screwed as a way of combating the motherhood penalty. So I want to share with you why, some of what we found, what discrimination actually looks like, and some really simple things that you can do to help women who are experiencing this type of discrimination in the workplace. Before I move on, I'm not one for fancy slides. I have no idea how to make them, and I haven't got any money to make them. So it's a bit weird, I tend to take photos of my children illustrating what I'm talking about, which, I hope you don't find really odd. I do worry that when they get a bit older, they might Google pregnancy and their face might come back, but we've got a long way off till that might happen, so. Pregnancy and maternity discrimination is a global issue. No country is immune. It's a key contributor to the gender pay gap, and it affects the representation of women. To them, and the next day they sacked me by voicemail. I was left heartbroken, terrified. I was 4 months pregnant, I had a mortgage to pay. My career was in tatters, my confidence was on the floor. The next week I discovered I was having a high-risk pregnancy. Whether the stress of that had brought on the high-risk pregnancy, who knows? I believe it did. But it meant that I couldn't do anything about it. It was taken out of my hands. After I had the baby, I attended parent groups and started talking to other mums about what had happened to me, and discovered that far from this being a unique incident, this was happening all the time. Women were being sacked, made redundant, they were being demoted, bullied, and harassed, all for daring to want a family and a career. In the UK, the US and Australia, among other countries, the number of women encountering pregnancy and maternity discrimination is increasing. In fact, in the UK, the number of women who lose their jobs for getting pregnant has almost doubled in the last 10 years. Here are some of the statistics for you.
54,000 women every year are forced out of a job because of pregnancy.
Again, 54,000 women a year lose their jobs due to pregnancy or maternity. So that means 1 in 9 of the women that you are seeing will lose their job because they're pregnant. 77% of working mums encounter negative or discriminatory treatment in the workplace. That's 3/4 of working mums. And yet less than 1% raise a tribunal claim and only 3% raise an internal grievance process. So you've got these massive statistics, all these women that are experiencing this discrimination, and yet this tiny, tiny percentage that are actually doing something about it. I believe the reason why they're not doing something about it is because they haven't got the confidence and the knowledge that they need at that point to do something about it, which is one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today, but we'll come on to that. 81%, I'm sure you've probably heard this statistic before, but 81% of women experience at least one mental health problem during or after pregnancy. That statistic doesn't shock me. I've experienced quite a few with both of my children. But in this context, it's really important because you've already got a woman who is vulnerable, both mentally and physically, and then you add discrimination on top of it, and it can cause serious problems to a woman's mental health long term. So I set up Pregnant Then Screwed as a way of documenting these experiences. If you go on the Pregnant Then Screwed website, there are over 800 stories on there from women who've experienced discrimination, telling their stories in their own words. And it was a way of shining a light on this problem, showing what was really happening from the women who were experiencing it. We then launched in the US, Spain, and recently we launched in Sweden, which is a country you would never think where this happens, but it does. I'm not clicking through, am I? Sorry. So I want to give you a taster of some of the stories that we have received to the site. This is Natalie. Natalie had worked for her organisation for 4 years. Things were going really well. Her boss had said to her that she deserved a promotion. He said she had to go for an interview, but it was just a formality. The job was in the bag. Before the interview, Natalie told her boss that she was pregnant. She went for the interview. She didn't get the job. When she asked her boss why, he said he had discussed things with his wife and they had decided that her priorities would change. This is Zara. When Zara informed her boss that she was pregnant, her boss demanded that she have an abortion. When she refused, her boss told her that this would ruin her career. This is Louise. Louise worked in the legal profession. She was doing really, really well. She'd worked in it for 4 years. She'd been promoted every year she'd been in it. All her personal development reviews were excellent. She was being given major clients. She took 12 months off to look after her son when he was born, and the day she returned, her female boss said to her that she didn't believe women with children under the age of 5 should work. From that point on, she was alienated from meetings. She had clients taken off her, and all her personal development reviews were average. Louise knew she hadn't changed. Her work commitment, her work capacity, everything was exactly the same as it was before. What had changed was the way people reacted to her now that she was a mother. This is Samantha. Samantha had worked for the same organisation for 2 years. She was really happy. When she informed her boss and her colleagues that she was pregnant, she was bullied and harassed so badly that she went into labour prematurely. When she was in neonatal with her baby who could have died, her boss called her and made her redundant. So why are women all over the world being punished for wanting a family and a career? Well, more women are working than ever before, obviously, some out of choice, others out of necessity. The problem seems to be deeply entrenched gender stereotypes. Stereotypes that tell us that from a point a woman gets pregnant, she is a mother. She's fulfilled her ultimate destiny. All her previous achievements are almost redundant. She's a homemaker, she's a mother, that's what's important. This same phenomenon doesn't happen for men. When men become fathers, they get pay rises and promotions. It's as if we're saying, you can do your job and you can procreate. How manly. Recent research in the UK backs this up. So some recent research by a university showed that women who take time out to care for children are seen as less competent and less committed when they return to work. Women who don't take time out to care for children are seen as not caring, so you can't win. An influential 2005 study compared identical resumes. They only differed by parental status. Mothers were rated as less competent, less committed, deserving of lower salaries, not deserving of promotions or management training. They were given a starting salary that was $11,000 below other types of employees. Men, on the other hand, benefited if they were fathers. So what is discrimination? What does it look like? There's a huge spectrum of discrimination. I touched on this before. You can get, it tends to fit into these categories. So you get sackings, redundancies. Sackings are rare, but they happen. Sackings, redundancies, demotions, stagnant careers, bullying, and harassment. Discrimination is essentially behaviour by any employer that negatively affects your employment because you are pregnant or because you are a mother. So the stories that we've looked at are kind of really obvious types of discrimination, but there's much more subtle, insidious discrimination. We had a woman who was supposed to be going to Paris for a big training event, and it would have had a really positive effect on her career, probably resulting in a promotion further down the line. She told her employer that she was pregnant, and they then decided that she couldn't go to Paris. Another colleague had to go instead because she wasn't going to be around for 9 months. That's discrimination. They are negatively affecting her career because she is pregnant. So how can you help? I appreciate that you don't have very much time with the patient, and there is a huge amount of pressure on you with each patient that you have. But I really genuinely believe that early intervention is the key to solving this. Even just mentioning the word discrimination, maybe giving them, signposting them to somewhere, just asking them if they're okay at work, if they've encountered any problems. These types of things will then alert them to a problem when it's there, when it happens. I've just listed out some of the legal rights. I'm not an employment lawyer, and I don't expect you to run through all of this with one of your patients, but I think it's important just to note some of these key laws that are going to be important for working pregnant women. So any appointment that they attend with you, they should be being paid for. They are legally allowed 7 to 10 appointments that are paid by the company. And yes, we would suggest that they try and negotiate a time that works for the company, but they have a legal right to come to your appointments. They're entitled to 52 weeks holiday, 52 weeks leave plus holiday. You accrue holiday when you're on maternity leave. They have to tell an employer that they are pregnant 15 weeks before the due date. They don't have to tell them before that if they're concerned and worried what the reaction might be. Their employer should carry out a risk assessment, and employers rarely do this, but actually they have a legal obligation to be carrying out a risk assessment to make sure that woman is safe when she's at work. If they've had up to 26 weeks off, they're entitled to go back to their exact same job. If it's up to 52 weeks off, then they have to have a similar job, and it has to be the same salary. And if they have a claim, if there's a problem, they must raise that claim within 3 months less 1 day, which is a really short window. We're actually campaigning at the moment for that to be extended. But if they don't raise the claim within that time, they don't have a claim. If you do bring this up with a patient that you're working with and they say there is a problem, then these are the 3 key steps. So we would say, firstly, talk to an employer, because actually a lot of the problems can be resolved very easily just through a conversation. Sometimes employers just really don't realise what they're doing. So if you just bring it into the cold light of day, then it can get sorted. Tell them to document everything. So we need to know dates, times, who it was. Try and get things sent by email rather than it just being a conversation. And finally, we have a legal advice line that's free. So yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to play this recording of somebody telling us.
When I returned...
Actually, we'll play the next one because it's more relevant for this.
I was waiting for my 12-week scan to tell my employers that I was pregnant, but unfortunately at 10 weeks I had a complication, which meant I had to go into A&E. After being given the all clear by my doctors, I decided that I would tell my employers. I sat down with them both male. One was polite, the other didn't say anything. Over the following month, I was subject to horrendous bullying and harassment by the man who said nothing. It started out as small things, just general passive aggression, but then built up to him humiliating me in front of my team that I was supposed to manage, and my clients. He also slammed doors and threw work at me, and generally muttered things under his breath. After a month of this, I suffered a series of panic attacks and decided enough was enough. It was no longer just affecting me, but my baby. I asked to meet with my boss, who was polite, and I asked for a senior colleague to sit in the meeting also. I explained what had been going on and how I felt. My other boss, who was polite, he just turned it round on me and said I was making it up, and actually I had a series of faults. However, my senior colleagues backed up everything I said and supported me. I was then signed off by the GP for stress for 2 weeks. A week into my stress leave, I received a letter from my employer's solicitors saying that, in fact, the meeting that I had asked for was a disciplinary meeting, and now that they had decided to let me go. I then instructed a lawyer and gave her all of the evidence contrary to this. And over the next month, they were battling between them. I generally think I deal with stress well, but after having the panic attacks, I just feel, I feel embarrassed that it came to that. I feel also my confidence has reduced. I also feel more nervous than I've felt ever in the past, because it was so horrendous and I'd never experienced anything like it.
That's it.
I think we've got 2 minutes for any questions, and we do have a roving mic roving around. I've gone right in front. Well done. She's coming, she's coming. We'll get roller skates next time.
Are we allowed to know what it was that you did originally, whenever you were treated so badly in terms of employment?
Well, are you allowed to know what I did, what my job was? I was working for a children's charity. Charities can be really bad for it. Charities and education.
What do women do when they raise concerns? Where do they go to, rather, when they want to raise concerns about their employer, if they're in that kind of situation, and then it gets, like that last lady, it gets turned back on them? What can they do then?
It's really tricky. It depends what type of organisation you work in. If you work in a really large organisation, you'll have a HR department. So you would go to the HR department. And there should be somebody in any organisation that manages the human resources. So you would direct your complaint to that person initially, and you'd say, I want to raise an internal grievance process, which is it's sort of before it goes to lawyers. So it's an official process that a company has to oblige and go through. But you don't know how they're going to react. But whenever you have any meetings with an employee, you should always take a representative with you so they can be a witness to anything that's said.
But you can see why women, though, because you said right at the beginning earlier on that less than 1% or something like that will actually take a grievance or take it further. But you can see why, because it looks as though they've got the odds stacked against them. Because if they make a complaint, and then, you know, depending on whether it's a large organisation, small organisation, in fact, with some women, they probably think, well, it's not worth the stress. My health and my baby is more important.
Absolutely.
So you can see why they just don't bother go through with it. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it looks as though everything's for the company rather than for the woman.
Everything is stacked against you, it's true. And that's why those figures are so low. But if they, in a lot of cases, if they do raise it, it will get resolved relatively early on. Otherwise, it can grow and get worse and worse and worse. So we would recommend people do discuss it with their employer and try and just see if they can resolve it before they take it any further.
One last one.
I'm going to digress a little.
Okay.
I want to place myself in the position of the employer.
Okay.
We have found situations where we have lazy women. They don't want to work. Yeah. They'll give excuses with their pregnancy. And there are others who work. They tell them to go rest. They say, no, I want to work. So if you find yourself as an employer having an employee who is lazy and using the pregnancy as an excuse, what are you expected to do?
I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I'm sure it does happen. But the figures of 54,000 women a year show that this isn't just about lazy women. This is about a perception from employers of pregnant women and mothers that is incorrect. So we perceive pregnant women and mothers as distracted, as not interested in their job anymore, that they have other priorities, and that just isn't true. So that's what we need to change. It's that cultural perception that we need to change. Yes, of course, in every situation, work situation, you're going to get bad employees. And so, but the law isn't fully protecting pregnant women anyway, and new mums as it should be. So we need to upgrade the law and legislation to make sure that they're protected against these rogue employers, not employees.
Okay, that's a good note to finish on. Thank you very much for
You're
that
welcome.
exercise.